Welcome back to our news bulletin. We start from Afghanistan, which says a week-long period of the reduction in violence agreement will begin tonight. National Security Council spokesperson Javed Faisal said Kabul hopes the Taliban will abide by their commitments. Faisal said the government hopes the plan is extended for a longer time and opens the way for a ceasefire and intra-Afghan talks. The Taliban have previously refused to speak directly to the government in Kabul, which they denounce as a US puppet. Faisal said Afghan forces will retaliate to the Taliban's smallest violation of the agreement. The plan was set by the US and the Taliban as a precondition to signing a peace deal. The chief of the Libyan National Army, Khalifa Haftar, says he is ready for a conditional ceasefire in the capital, Tripoli. Haftar's remarks come after the military's representatives of both warring parties resumed the UN broker talks in Geneva. In an interview, Haftar said truce could be reached if Turkey agrees to stop supplying weapons to the government of national accord. Meanwhile, the UN envoy for Libya says a political solution for the conflict-torn country is extremely difficult but possible.
Once the expression of discontent had been made, we couldn't lose any of our precious time in Geneva. And I'm very happy that both delegations came back this morning with even more energy towards finding a deal.
Les deux délégations sont revenues ce matin avec encore plus d'entrain pour arriver une fois l'expression de cette.
Meanwhile, voting has begun in 207 constituencies for Iran's 11th parliamentary elections. Over 7,000 candidates are contesting for 290 seats across 31 provinces. Nearly 58 million people are eligible to vote. The country's Guardian Council said they expect a 50% voter turnout. Some prominent pro-reform politicians and activists have called for the elections to be boycotted. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was the first to cast his vote. The US has imposed sanctions on 5 Iranian officials in charge of vetting candidates for Tehran's parliamentary elections. The sanctioned officials include Ahmad Jannati, a powerful cleric in the Guardian Council. In a statement, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said Washington will not tolerate the manipulation of elections. He said the US will continue to support the democratic aspirations of Iranians. Mohammad Yazdi, a former chief of the judiciary who was recently appointed to the Guardian Council, was also blacklisted. The sanctions mean American assets belonging to these officials will be frozen. It also bans Americans from carrying out transactions with them. Moving on to China, where 118 people have died in the last 24 hours from the new coronavirus outbreak, bringing the death toll to 2,236. The National Health Commission says 889 more people have tested positive for the infection, increasing the total number to over 75,000. More in this report.
People in China are becoming hopeful with a decline in the number of new coronavirus infections. The World Health Organization says a continued slide of new cases in the country is encouraging. The global health body says it's time to fight the COVID-19 virus while it is still manageable.
This is the time to attack the virus while it is actually manageable, small number of cases in the rest of the world. If we don't hit hard now using the window of opportunity, we might face with a serious problem.
After South Korea's first fatality from the virus, the government is deploying its military medical staff and providing temporary isolation facilities. South Korea's Prime Minister Chung Seo-kyun says he's listing 2 cities as special care zones.
The government will take special measures by designating the Daegu and Cheongdo areas as special care zones, as the sudden hike in the number of the confirmed cases have been reported from there.
Regional leaders have pledged to pool resources to overcome the problems caused by the outbreak.
Saudi Arabia says it has shot down several ballistic missiles fired by Yemen Houthis rebels at civilian areas in the kingdom. In a statement, coalition spokesperson Colonel Turki al-Maliki said the projectiles were fired from the Yemeni capital, Sana'a. Al-Maliki said the coalition will continue using decisive measures to protect civilians from such attacks. He said the attack was a violation of international humanitarian law. The Houthis have not claimed responsibility for the attack. Yemen has been beset by violence and chaos since 2014, when rebels overran much of the country, including the capital, Sana'a. The European Union has called on Syria's combatants to immediately stop the fighting in Idlib province. In a statement, the European Council called a renewed military offensive in Idlib unacceptable. The warning came during an EU summit devoted to drawing up the bloc's budget. The EU urged the warring sides to protect civilians and implement their commitments to the Sochi Agreement. It said international human rights law must be followed to allow unimpeded and direct access to aid. The bloc said it will take the situation in Syria to the International Criminal Court if offenses continue. The situation in Idlib escalated again in February after government and militant forces renewed attacks. Ireland's Prime Minister Leo Varadkar has resigned after his party Fine Gael conceded a defeat in the general election. Varadkar will remain as interim PM while the country's three main parties work through coalition talks to appoint a successor. The session of Parliament's lower house was adjourned till March 5th after it failed to elect a new premier. No party secured a majority in the February 8th election. Sinn Féin leader Mary-Lou MacDonald received the most votes with the approval of 45 members. 80 votes are needed of the 160 seats to be elected Ireland's Prime Minister. The country's main opposition party, Fianna Fáil, is now the largest party in the parliament on 38 seats. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back to our news bulletin. The leaders of the EU have begun 2 days of tough talks on a joint 7-year budget from 2021. The bloc will try to fill an $81 billion hole left by the UK's departure amid climate migration and development challenges. More in this report.
The joint budget is the most tangible expression of the key topics the EU members want to focus on over the next 7 years. Ahead of the summit, German Chancellor Angela Merkel warned of very hard and difficult negotiations. She said her country is not satisfied with how talks are going forward.
It is clear that for the convergence of the European Union, we will of course inject more money from the German side than we will get back. But this must also be a well-balanced among the net contributors group.
French President Emmanuel Macron says compensating British departure by slashing resources will be improper. Macron accused the EU27 of giving up on ambitious plans for the future.
We need to account for the British departure, but it would be unacceptable for Europe to compensate for the British departure by reducing its resources.
European Commission President Ursula Leyen, meanwhile, stressed the need for investing in innovation and research. She said reforming the budget is the ultimate goal.
The proposal we have is a good starting point, and I think it is very important to emphasize that if Europe wants to prosper in the next decade, it has to invest in innovation and research, it has to invest in the new priorities, so the modernizing of the budget is my goal in these negotiations.
While the bloc wants to spend more on climate, migration and security measures, the rich net contributors refuse to pay more, with poorer net beneficiaries determined to keep the support they get for farming and development.
A 70-year-old prayer leader has been stabbed inside a London mosque in an apparent Islamophobic attack. Police say the suspect has been arrested and a probe is underway. Police said the prayer leader was treated by paramedics before being taken to the hospital. Officials say they have increased patrols around the area to provide reassurance to worshippers and locals. An eyewitness said the attacker was restrained by worshippers.
You know, Imam, yeah? Yeah. You start to pray fast. we don't know what's going on. We said, why you try fast, you know? And then we heard, oh, wow, you know, screaming. Mu'addin was screaming. And then we see the blood, the knife was his shoulders.
Bolivia's Supreme Electoral Tribunal has disqualified former President Evo Morales from running for the Senate in May's general election. Morales has been exiled in Argentina since resigning as president. Head of the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, Salvador Romero, said Morales does not meet residency requirements. Responding in a tweet, Morales said, "The decision is a blow to democracy." Romero said, "All the qualifying candidates must continue their campaigns."
The Supreme Electoral Court invites all plaintiffs to contribute to a smooth development of the campaign. The election on May 3rd is crucial for the democratic future of Bolivia.
Bolivia's new presidential and parliamentary elections are scheduled for May 3rd. Moving on to Africa. In South Sudan, President Salva Kiir and rebel leader Riek Machar have agreed to form a unity government as part of a 2018 peace deal. Following a meeting between the two leaders in Juba, Kiir said he will appoint Machar as the first vice president of the country. He said they are going to discuss the security of all opposition forces. Machar said they had a meeting with the president on outstanding issues. South Sudan's conflict broke out in 2013 after a dispute between Kiir and Machar over the number of states in the country. The fighting has left some 380,000 people dead and forced 4 million to flee their homes. In Zambia, millions of people are facing starvation due to severe drought. The country is struggling to survive the high temperatures, rising twice as fast as the global mean. More in this report.
Lizzie walked hours to fetch this food aid so she could feed her 4 children at least one meal a day.
Sometimes we eat once in a day. Sometimes when we find some other sources, we eat twice in a day.
A severe drought is gripping the area around Simumbwe in southern Zambia. Humanitarian groups are handing out maize and beans, the first distribution in the area. Food shortages also affect schooling.
I've got 70 pupils in my class. Just because of this hunger, there is absenteeism. Like for today, there were only 30 pupils in my class out of 70.
It rained recently, but don't be fooled by the greenery. Crops have been failing for years. 45 million people are at risk of famine in southern Africa, according to the UN's World Food Programme. 4 hours drive east lies the Kariba Dam, which produces around 40% of Zambia's electricity. But now, because of the drought, the turbines can't produce enough power. From a daily meal to school attendance and economic growth, climate change has spiraling effects that are hard to stop.
In Canada, a massive highway pileup south of Montreal has left 2 people dead and 60 injured. Police say the injuries vary between minor and serious. Local media reports said the accident involved over 200 vehicles. Damaged and smashed vehicles littered Highway 15 near the suburb of La Prairie. The Quebec Transport Minister said the crash was caused by a strong snow squall, creating a sudden lack of visibility for drivers. In the UK, 100 flood warnings remain in place as western parts of the country continue to bear the brunt of Storm Dennis. Major incidents have been declared by emergency services in South Wales and parts of England. Police and firefighters rescued people trapped in their homes after rivers burst their banks. Video footage showed flood hit Worcester on the River Severn as forecasters warned of further misery. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn visited flood victims in South Wales and criticized Prime Minister Boris Johnson for ignoring flood-hit communities. Storm Dennis has hit Britain barely a week after Storm Ciara disrupted life in northern England and left thousands without electricity. The airline industry is expected to lose nearly $30 billion of revenue this year from the coronavirus outbreak. The International Air Transport Association says demand for air travel will fall for the first time in more than a decade. IATA says airlines in the Asia-Pacific region could lose nearly $28 billion of revenue this year. In a statement, the global airline industry body said companies outside Asia stand to lose revenue of $1.5 billion. IATA said 2003's SARS virus was responsible for a 5% fall in demand for air travel in the Asia-Pacific region. Stock markets across Europe are trading lower as investors continue to monitor latest developments following the coronavirus outbreak. Major stocks are losing steam as they fail to maintain rally. London's FTSE 100 has lost over 0.5% after publisher Pearson's shares dropped over 1%. CAC 40 in Paris is trading over 0.5% lower as automobile manufacturer Renault declined nearly 3%. Frankfurt's DAX has lost a fraction as Alliance shares dropped nearly 1%. In Asia, Seoul's Kospi closed about 1.5% lower as shares of chipmaker SK Hynix dropped around 1%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng lost over 1% after shares of conglomerate Ping An Insurance shed over 0.5%. Shanghai Composite gained a fraction after Beijing said resumption of economic activity is accelerating after a coronavirus-led shutdown. Meanwhile, international Brent crude oil price has lost over 1% amid slowing global economic activity. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.